The moment everything changed, let me start with a question that might shake you a little. What if the biggest breakthrough of your life is waiting on the other side of your silence? I'm talking about that silence you've been afraid to sit in, that silence you've tried to fill with explanations, proving yourself, defending yourself, chasing validation, arguing with people who never cared, talking to people who never listened, and trying to convince people who already made up their minds about you. You know that silence. See, there comes a moment in every woman's life where God says, stop talking, I'm about to show them. And that moment, right there, is where winning begins. I remember talking to a woman years ago after a show. She looked exhausted, not physically, but spiritually. She said, Steve, I'm tired of explaining myself. I'm tired of arguing. I'm tired of defending who I am. But if I don't speak up, they'll think they're right. And I looked her dead in the eye and said, baby, sometimes silence is the loudest announcement of your power. Oh, she broke down crying right there, because deep down she knew the truth. Talking had become her cage. Silence was going to be her freedom. And that's what this entire journey is about today. This isn't about being quiet. This isn't about shrinking. This isn't about being soft. No, ma'am. This is about walking into a new level of power where you don't just talk like a winner. You live like one. You move like one. You become one. This is about stepping into a version of yourself where your results make more noise than your words ever could. Because every woman eventually learns the world doesn't respond to what you say. The world responds to what you do. And today we're going to take a journey, a long, deep, soul-shifting journey through 7 powerful truths, 7 transformational rules, 7 turning points that can take any woman from talking about her life to winning with her life. So sit with this. Feel this. Let this enter the parts of you nobody sees. Because when this message reaches your spirit, you're not just going to think differently. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. There's a moment in every woman's life when she finally realizes that not every battle requires her voice. Not every disrespect requires a response. Not every rumor requires correction. Not every accusation deserves attention. In that moment, when she stops reacting and starts observing, that's when her power truly begins. Because silence is not the absence of strength. Silence is the application of strength. It's choosing not to waste energy where it can't produce growth. It's choosing not to fight battles that don't lead to victory. It's choosing not to defend yourself in courts that were never interested in justice. Silence is a strategy, and the women who learn this become dangerous in the most unstoppable way. See, the world has conditioned women to believe that volume equals power. Speak louder, speak faster, speak up, prove yourself, explain yourself, defend yourself. But here's the truth. Most people never tell you the loudest person in the room is usually the most insecure. The one who needs to talk constantly is often the one who's afraid of being exposed. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real power doesn't need to convince anybody. Real power moves quietly, intentionally, confidently, because it knows exactly where it's going. When you truly know who you are, you don't need to talk about it. Your actions reveal it. Your discipline proves it. Your results announce it. Silence becomes your signature. Think about greatness. Think about champions. Think about anybody who's ever elevated their life to a level other people couldn't even imagine. They all had a season where they disappeared, a season where they went quiet, a season where they stopped talking about their moves and started making their moves. Because every winner understands something most people never learn. Preparation requires privacy. You cannot build a kingdom in a crowd. You cannot heal in public. You cannot grow under constant noise. Silence becomes the workshop where you build the life you were meant to live. And let's talk about why silence feels so uncomfortable for so many women. It's because silence forces you to face yourself. When you're talking, arguing, explaining, defending, you're distracted. Your mind is outward. Your energy is outward. Your emotions are outward. But when you go quiet, everything turns inward. You start hearing your own thoughts. You start confronting your own truth. You start noticing the things you've ignored. Silence puts a mirror in front of your soul. And sometimes that's scary, but it's necessary. because you can't grow into the woman you're meant to be while hiding from the woman you currently are. Silence becomes the space where transformation begins. Now, let's get real about something else. People will misunderstand your silence. They'll call it weakness. They'll call it attitude. They'll call it arrogance. They'll call it surrender. They'll say you're scared. They'll say you're backing down. They'll say you've got nothing to say. But hear this in your spirit. Their interpretation of your silence is not your responsibility. Let them think what they want. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them assume. While they're busy running their mouths, you'll be busy running your life. Silence gives you freedom from the noise of other people's opinions. It reminds you that you don't owe anybody a response or a performance, because silence is control. When you stop reacting to everything, you stop being controlled by everything. Every argument you walk away from protects your peace. Every insult you ignore protects your focus. Every lie you refuse to address protects your energy. Silence is emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is one of the highest forms of strength a woman can ever develop. Anybody can yell. Anybody can clap back. Anybody can argue. But it takes a woman of deep maturity to say, I won't waste my breath. I've got bigger things to build. And here's the beautiful part. Silence turns your life into a surprise. People won't see your progress coming. They won't see your growth coming. They won't see your elevation coming because you didn't announce it. You executed it. One day they'll look up and realize they're no longer talking about you. They're talking about your results. The same people who doubted you will be stunned. The same people who dismissed you will be speechless. The same people who tried to provoke, you will have nothing left to say because you didn't argue your way to the top. You worked your way to the top. And when the victory finally shows up, when the dream becomes real, when the goal becomes visible, when the results become undeniable, you won't have to say a single word. Your life will speak for you. Your success will speak for you. Your elevation will speak for you. Silence didn't make you weaker. Silence made you wiser. Silence didn't stop your power. Silence sharpened your power because silence was never the retreat. Silence was the setup. Silence was the strategy. Silence was the preparation for winning. And now you're ready. Stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned access to you. There comes a point in a woman's life when she finally recognizes the emotional exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to justify her choices, her dreams, her boundaries, her mistakes, her growth, and her identity to people who were never qualified to hear her heart in the first place. And that realization hits hard because explaining yourself feels like the right thing to do, especially if you're kind, empathetic, loyal, or raised to be accommodating. You think clarity will bring peace. You think if they just understood you, they would respect you. You think if you explain your intentions, they will see your heart. But the truth, and it's a truth that stings, is that some people don't want to understand you. They want to own you. They don't ask questions to support you. They ask questions to control the narrative, to challenge your confidence, to poke holes in your spirit, to keep you small enough to manage. And when you keep talking, defending, justifying, explaining, you unknowingly hand them that power. Every explanation becomes a rope. Every justification becomes a chain. Every attempt to make someone get it becomes a quiet surrender of your dignity. Because explaining yourself over and over again to the wrong people starts teaching your brain a dangerous lie. Maybe they have the right to judge me. Maybe I do need their approval. Maybe I'm supposed to prove myself. And once that mindset takes root, your self-worth becomes dependent on someone else's reaction. That's how women lose themselves slowly, quietly, politely, one explanation at a time. You don't owe your journey to anyone who never walked beside you during the struggle. You don't owe your truth to anyone who wouldn't even pray for you when you were breaking. You don't owe your plans to anyone who laughed at your dreams. You don't owe your heart to anyone who only shows up to criticize it. The only people who deserve access to your voice, your real voice, are the ones who honor it, protect it, uplift it, and value it. And here's the raw reality some people like you better confused, apologetic, uncertain, and quiet about your greatness. Because as long as you're explaining yourself, you're still seeking their approval. And as long as you seek their approval, they get to feel superior. They get to feel needed. They get to feel like the judge of your worth. Your explanations become a stage for their ego. And the moment you stop explaining is the moment their power collapses. Notice something: the people who truly love you don't need explanations. They may ask questions, but they ask to understand, not to attack. They ask to support, not to shame. They ask to help, not to control. Love doesn't demand justification. Respect doesn't require defense. Real connection doesn't interrogate your soul like a courtroom. But the wrong people, oh, they'll twist every word. They'll question your motives. They'll gossip about your decisions. They'll criticize your growth. They'll make you feel guilty for evolving, not because you're wrong, but because your growth threatens their comfort. Your elevation exposes their stagnation. Your confidence challenges their insecurity. And instead of rising, they'll try to shrink you back down to a size that makes them feel safe. So, when you stop explaining yourself, people will get uncomfortable. They'll say you're acting different. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you think you're better. They'll accuse you of being distant, cold, rude, secretive, or arrogant. But what they're really saying is, I can no longer control you. I no longer have access to the parts of you that made me feel powerful. Let them talk. Your silence isn't disrespect. Your silence is protection. It's how you say, without a single word, my peace is not up for negotiation. You're not required to write essays about your decisions. You're not required to justify your boundaries. You're not required to explain why you left, why you stayed, why you grew, why you changed, why you chose yourself. Growth is not a courtroom. Healing is not a debate. Dreams are not public property. And the moment you stop explaining, something miraculous happens. Your life becomes lighter. The emotional burden lifts. The pressure dissolves. You start breathing again. You start thinking clearly. You start hearing your own voice above the noise. Silence becomes a sanctuary where you rediscover your value, not based on what others think, but based on what you know to be true. You begin to realize that your time is expensive. Your energy is sacred. Your heart is rare. And not everyone qualifies. Silence becomes your filter. The people who truly care will stay. The ones who only came for control will fade. And that's not a loss. That's divine subtraction. Later, when your results speak for you, when your glow becomes undeniable, when your wins become visible, the same people who demanded explanations will suddenly want access. They'll say, how did you do it? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me? But they won't get the credit and they won't get the privilege because they failed the test. Access denied. You don't win by convincing people. You win by becoming the woman you were born to be. No explanation required. Your silence is where God does his best work. There comes a season in a woman's life that feels like a shutdown. A pause, a strange, unsettling quiet that almost feels like abandonment. The calls stop. The support fades. The noise of the world grows distant. The people who once surrounded you disappear. The doors that used to open suddenly close. And you start wondering, why is everything so silent? Why does it feel like God isn't speaking, isn't moving, isn't showing up for me? That silence can feel heavy. It can feel lonely. It can feel confusing because we're trained to believe that activity means progress, noise means direction, and movement means purpose. But spiritually, God doesn't work like people do. Silence with people might mean neglect, but silence with God, that's construction. God does his most powerful work in the places no one can see. The womb of silence is where destiny grows. The dark room of silence is where purpose develops. The quiet corners of your life are where God molds, shapes, strengthens, heals, and prepares you, not for who you were, but for who you're about to become. Because God knows something you don't always realize. You cannot rise publicly until you are restored privately. You cannot lead loudly until you are grounded quietly. You cannot walk into your next chapter until you are strengthened in silence. Silence with God is not punishment, it's protection. Sometimes God removes the voices around you because they were drowning out his voice within you. Sometimes God takes you out of the crowd because the crowd was influencing you more than your calling was. Sometimes God shuts doors because the room behind them would have destroyed you. And sometimes God silences the noise because if you kept hearing everyone else, you wouldn't learn how to hear yourself in Him. Think about every major transformation in life. Seeds grow in darkness. Babies form in the womb, hidden and silent. Diamonds are created under pressure, deep underground, far from sight. Growth is never loud. Breakthrough is never broadcast. Development is never public. God builds greatness in secrecy. And then, when the time is right, He reveals what He's been shaping all along. Not a moment earlier, not a moment later. The silence wasn't rejection. It was timing. And here's the part that hits deep. Silence forces you to trust God more than your understanding. When nothing is moving, you learn faith. When nothing is changing, you learn patience. When nothing makes sense, you learn surrender. Silence is God saying, stop relying on what you can see and lean on what I'm doing. Because if you could see the whole plan right now, you wouldn't need faith. If you could hear every answer, you wouldn't need trust. Silence is where God stretches you into the woman who can handle the blessing she prayed for. Many women beg God for elevation, but elevation comes with weight, responsibility, exposure, pressure, and God will never put a crown on a head that hasn't learned how to bow first. Silence is where humility grows. Silence is where character forms. Silence is where emotional maturity takes root. Silence is where God teaches you strength without shouting, confidence without applause, identity without validation, and purpose without permission. And here's something most people never understand. Sometimes God takes people out of your life, not because they were evil, but because they were loud. Their opinions were louder than His direction. Their influence was louder than your intuition. Their presence was louder than your purpose. And God needed that silence to redirect you, realign you, and rebuild you. Not everyone is meant to witness your transformation. Not everyone is qualified to access your becoming. Some miracles are private until they're ready. There will be nights when silence feels like God is far away. But He's not distant, He's working. He's arranging connections you haven't met yet. He's preparing opportunities you haven't seen yet. He's healing wounds you didn't even realize were still bleeding. He's shaping strength you don't know you need yet. His silence is not inactivity, it's invisible activity. And when God finally reveals what He's been building in you during that silence, it won't be small. It won't be average. It won't be ordinary. It will be undeniable. The kind of blessing that makes people say, how did she survive that? How did she rise from that? How did she become this? And you'll know the answer without saying a word, because God did His best work in your quietest season. One day, the silence that scared you will become the silence that saved you. The silence that broke you will become the silence that built you. The silence that confused you will become the silence that crowned you. You'll look back and realize God wasn't ignoring you. He was transforming you. Your silence was never empty. It was holy ground. The power of radical responsibility. There comes a moment in every human life when you have to look in the mirror and admit a truth that most people spend their entire lifetime running away from. Your life is in your hands. Not your parents' hands. Not your teacher's hands. Not destiny, not luck, not fate, not circumstances. Your life, your results, your growth, your success, your direction belongs to you. And the day you accept that fully, without excuses, without blame, without stories, is the day your life begins to change. Radical responsibility means you stop explaining why you're stuck and start deciding how you're going to rise. It means you stop saying, why is this happening to me? And start saying, what can I do about this? It means you stop waiting for someone to save you and you become the savior of your own life. Because here's the truth, nobody is coming. No hero, no miracle, no rescue team. The world doesn't hand success to people. It responds to those who take ownership of their journey. You can't be passive and powerful at the same time. You can't live in excuses and expect extraordinary results. You can't blame your situation and then hope to outgrow it. Responsibility is the doorway to freedom. Most people never grow because they're too busy pointing fingers. They blame their past, their environment, their family, their lack of resources, their pain, their struggles. And every time they blame something outside themselves, they give away a little bit more power. They shrink. They become smaller. They turn into passengers in their own life instead of the driver. But growth demands the opposite. Growth demands that you grab the steering wheel. Growth demands that you say, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Growth demands courage. The courage to admit that where you are right now may not be your fault, but where you go from here absolutely is. When you embrace radical responsibility, something shifts inside you. Suddenly, obstacles stop feeling like walls and start looking like puzzles. Problems stop feeling like punishment and start becoming opportunities for strength. Failure stops being a dead end and becomes a lesson. You stop being a victim and become a creator. You stop thinking about what you don't have and start using what you do. Responsibility activates your power. It awakens your potential. It unlocks the part of you that's been waiting to lead, to rise, to build, to achieve. And listen, responsibility doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you won't fall, struggle, or make mistakes. It means that when you fall, you own the fall. When you fail, you own the failure. When you lose, you own the loss. Because when you own something, you gain the power to change it. You can't fix what you won't take responsibility for. You can't outgrow something you keep blaming on someone else. Ownership is the first step toward transformation. It's the foundation of growth. It's the moment you stop reacting to life and start creating life. Think about it. Every great leader, every successful entrepreneur, every champion, every visionary has one thing in common. They take responsibility. They don't wait for conditions to be perfect. They don't wait for approval. They don't wait for someone to hand them permission. They move, they act, they take charge. Even when they don't feel ready, even when they don't have all the answers, even when the odds are against them, because they know that responsibility isn't a burden, it's a privilege. It means you have control. It means you have choice. It means you have power. So right now, ask yourself, not as a question, but as a decision, am I ready to own my life? Am I ready to stop blaming and start building? Am I ready to take control of my future instead of letting my past control me? Because your growth begins the moment your excuses end. Your next level begins the moment your blame stops. Your transformation begins the moment you say with full conviction, no matter what happened before, from this point forward, I lead my life. Radical responsibility is the turning point. It's the moment a dreamer becomes a doer. It's the moment a follower becomes a leader. It's the moment a trapped person becomes unstoppable. When you take responsibility, you unlock a force inside you that cannot be intimidated, cannot be defeated, cannot be denied. Because a person who owns their life becomes dangerous, not to others, but to their limitations. And that's the path to growth. Own your choices, own your effort, own your destiny, because the pen is in your hands, the page is blank, and the story is yours to write.